The creature died, but he got claimed by the alien throne. They told him not to move, not to speak, not to interfere. The alien court was in session, high ceilings of living crystal, guards with armor that shimmered like water. At the center, the Queen of Virex Prime, tall, unreadable, her face half-veiled in light. And on the ground near her throne, a small, twitching, insect-like creature. It looked harmless, but it crept toward her foot. Nobody moved, not even the guards. Because on Virex Prime, every life form is sacred, even the parasites. But Jake Carter, the human engineer from Earth's delegation, didn't know that. He just saw a bug heading for the Queen's exposed ankle. So he did what humans do. He stepped forward, muttered "gross," and crushed it under his boot. Silence fell like a dropped planet. The room froze. Weapons unsheathed in silence. His own team looked at him like he'd just punched a deity. Jake's heart thundered in his chest. His mouth went dry as sandpaper. The sweat beading on his forehead felt like ice. The faces of the delegation behind him, shocked, horrified, furious, burned into the back of his neck. He didn't need to turn around to know Ambassador Chen was probably calculating the fastest way to disavow him, but the Queen didn't scream. She didn't rage. She stood, walked to him slowly, stopped inches from his face, looked down at the crushed creature, and whispered, "You killed the crawler." Jake gulped. "Yeah, sorry. Was that, bad?" Each word felt like glass in his throat. The Queen's eyes, all four of them, studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Up close, her skin had a subtle iridescence, like mother of pearl, and he could see the slight movement of what looked like gills along her neck. The Queen knelt, touched the bloodied floor with one long silver finger. "Do you know how long that thing has haunted my throne?" No. 17 cycles. My guards feared its venom. My priest called it a cursed omen. And you stepped on it, without hesitation." Jake blinked. "I mean, it was just a bug." She looked at him like he had solved a war, then turned to the entire court and declared, "Earth has given us a warrior. This man fears not prophecy nor poison. He will be honored as Virex Prime's defender of the crown." Jake laughed. "Wait, what?" And that's how he was given a ceremonial blade, a personal guard, and an alien robe so heavy it nearly snapped his spine. The delegation's relief was palpable. Ambassador Chen's rigid posture softened slightly, the diplomatic equivalent of collapsing with gratitude. The scientific team exchanged bewildered glances. Only Melissa, the xenobiologist, had the presence of mind to subtly shake her head at him, her eyes communicating a clear message. "Don't say another word." So Jake didn't. He stood there, the unfamiliar weight of the ornate blade at his hip, as the court erupted into a flurry of activity around him. Dignitaries approached to bow their heads in deference. Guards pounded their chest plates in salute, and Jake just smiled awkwardly, nodding as if this was all perfectly normal. As if he hadn't just accidentally stumbled into becoming an alien hero. Later that night in private, she brought him to the palace garden. No guards, no titles. "You stepped in without knowing the weight of your action," she said. "I just didn't want you to get bitten." She stared at him. "Do all your people protect others without knowing if it's sacred, dangerous, or political suicide?" He shrugged. "Only the good ones," she smiled, genuinely, and whispered, "Then I suppose I found a good one." He had come to fix broken satellites. Now he sat beside an alien queen under 2 moons, because he killed a bug no one else dared to touch. And somehow, she made him feel like it mattered. The garden was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Plants that seemed to breathe in unison. Flowers that tracked their movements with delicate, unfurling petals. Trees with transparent trunks, their sap glowing blue in the darkness. "You're still uncomfortable," the Queen said. Not a question, but an observation. Her voice carried an almost musical quality, like speaking through wind chimes. Jake adjusted the ceremonial robe for the 100th time. "Not exactly built for human frames," he admitted, "but I'm more uncomfortable with all this. I'm an engineer. I fix things. That's my job. I'm not a hero," she finished for him. "A politician," he corrected. "I don't know your customs. I don't understand your symbols. I could mess up 1,000 ways before breakfast tomorrow." The Queen reached toward a nearby plant. It responded to her proximity, bending toward her fingers like a cat seeking affection. "Tell me about Earth," she said suddenly. "Not the official reports. Tell me what it feels like." Jake hesitated, caught off guard by the shift. It's loud, busy, contradictory. We're always rushing somewhere, even when we don't know where we're going. And you? Do you know where you're going? The question felt heavy, loaded with meaning beyond the words themselves. Jake studied her profile in the strange dual moonlight. One moon silver, one faintly amber. Her features were both alien and somehow familiar, expressions that transcended species. I know I wasn't going anywhere special until I stepped on your bug, he answered honestly. She laughed then, a sound like crystal bells. The crawler was not mine. Nothing here is truly mine. I am merely a steward. That's actually how a lot of Earth's better leaders see themselves too. Yet you do not seem to admire them. Jake picked at the ornate fabric of his robe. Admiration is earned. Titles are just assigned, including Defender of the Crown. Her eyes glinted with something like mischief. Especially that one, he said, and found himself smiling back. A comfortable silence settled between them. In the distance, the capital city of Virex Prime glowed with soft bioluminescence, structures that seemed grown rather than built. The night air carried scents that had no Earth equivalent, something like cinnamon but sharper, something like ozone but sweeter. Tomorrow, she said finally, the real work begins. Jake's smile faltered. What real work? You killed the crawler. That means something here, more than you understand. Then help me understand. The queen stood, her robes flowing around her like liquid silver. Rest tonight, Defender. Tomorrow I will show you. As she turned to leave, Jake called after her. I don't even know your name. Your actual name, not your title. She paused, looked back over her shoulder. Ilara. My name is Ilara. I'm Jake. I know who you are. Jake Carter. And with those words hanging in the air, she disappeared into the shadows of the living garden, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and the weight of a title he never asked for. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Morning on Virex Prime came with a light that seemed to filter through the very air, diffused and gentle despite the system's harsh sun. Jake woke disoriented in quarters that felt both impossibly luxurious and subtly wrong. The bed too long, the ceiling too high, everything designed for bodies slightly different from his own. His Earth uniform had been taken away, replaced with clothing that mimicked human design but was clearly of Virexian manufacture. The fabric shifted color slightly with his body temperature, a disconcerting effect when he caught glimpses of himself in the reflective surfaces around the room. A soft chime announced a visitor. Jake opened the door to find a Virexian guard, not one of the intimidating royal guards from the court, but someone in lighter armor and with markings that Jake couldn't interpret. Defender, the guard said, bowing slightly. The Queen requests your presence. Jake nodded, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. Lead the way. The palace corridors twisted in ways that defied Earth architecture, sometimes opening to interior gardens where the boundary between inside and outside blurred. The palace staff they passed all stopped to acknowledge Jake with gestures he wasn't sure how to return. He settled for an awkward nod each time. Why are they doing that? He finally asked his guide. You are Defender now, the guard said, as if that explained everything. Right, but what does that actually mean? The guard paused, turning to face Jake fully. You killed the death crawler. Many tried. All failed. Some died. You succeeded without trying. The death crawler? That little thing? Small vessel, powerful venom, the guard said. One touch, paralysis. Two touches, death. It has haunted the court for cycles. Many believed it was untouchable, protected by dark forces. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. You're telling me I stepped on something that could have killed me instantly? The guard made a gesture that might have been the Virexian equivalent of a shrug. Yet you live. This is why you are Defender now. Before Jake could process this new information, they arrived at a set of doors unlike any others in the palace. Not the living crystal that seemed standard, but something darker, more solid, ancient. The guard stepped aside. The Queen awaits within. Jake hesitated for just a moment, then pushed the doors open. The room beyond was small by palace standards, circular, with a domed ceiling that displayed what looked like a star map. At the center stood Ilara, but not as he had seen her before. Gone were the formal court robes and veil. She wore simpler clothing, practical, almost severe. Her silver-white hair was pulled back tightly, revealing more of her face with its subtle, non-human angles. "Jake," she said, "thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We always have choices. Some are simply more difficult than others. Like choosing to tell me what's really going on." He stepped further into the room, letting the doors close behind him. "Your guard just told me that bug could have killed me with a touch. That doesn't seem like the kind of detail you leave out when thanking someone." Ilara's expression grew serious. "I apologize for the omission. The situation is complex. Simplify it for me." She gestured to the star map above. "Do you know what this shows?" Jake glanced up. The map was intricate, with lines connecting various stellar bodies. Some glowed brighter than others. "Star systems? Travel routes?" "Conquest paths," she corrected softly. "The history of an empire that once spanned 27 worlds. Your empire? My ancestors. The Virexian Dominion." She traced a hand through the air, and the map shifted, zooming in on a particular cluster. 300 cycles ago, we were warriors, conquerors. We believed it was our right to rule. Jake watched her closely, trying to reconcile this information with the seemingly peaceful society he'd glimpsed. "What changed?" "We encountered something we couldn't conquer." Ilara's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Something that nearly destroyed us instead." The map shifted again, focusing on a single planet. Unlike the others, this one was represented not in the glowing blue of the rest, but in a pulsing red. The Ket, a species that evolved alongside a predator so lethal, so perfect, that it shaped their entire civilization. They learned to use these predators as weapons. Her eyes met Jake's. "The death crawler is one such weapon. Engineered, not natural." Jake felt a chill run through him. "You're saying someone deliberately released that thing in your court?" "Yes." Ilara's face hardened. "The Ket were supposed to be extinct, their world rendered uninhabitable after our final conflict with them. Yet somehow their most feared weapon appeared in my court 17 cycles ago. And no one could kill it? In 17 years? Cycles, she corrected. Longer than your years. And no one could. Those who tried either died or their weapons passed through it, as if it wasn't fully present." Jake rubbed his temples, trying to absorb what she was saying. "But my boot worked just fine." "Yes." Her eyes bore into his. "And that is what we must understand? Why you could kill it when no Virexian could. What makes humans different?" "Because there are more of them, aren't there?" Jake said slowly, the implications sinking in. "The death crawler wasn't alone." Ilara nodded, her expression grim. 3 days ago, our outer settlements reported sightings. Yesterday, we lost contact with 2 of them entirely. "And you think this is the start of an invasion? By a species that's supposed to be extinct?" "I think," Ilara said carefully, "that I need your help, Jake Carter. Not as a diplomat, not as an engineer, but as the only person who has successfully killed a Ket weapon in over 200 cycles." Jake stared at her, the weight of what she was asking settling over him like the too heavy ceremonial robes. "You want me to teach you how to fight them?" "No," Ilara shook her head. "I want you to lead the fight. That is what it means to be defender of the crown." Jake paced the length of the small war room, his mind racing faster than his feet could carry him. "This is insane," he muttered, not for the first time. "I'm an engineer, not a soldier. I fix satellites, not alien invasions." Ilara watched him from where she stood beside a 3-dimensional tactical display, her patience seemingly infinite. "Yet you killed the unkillable." "By accident." Jake ran a hand through his hair, mussing it further. "Look, there has to be someone better qualified. What about your military? Your actual defenders? They are at the outer settlements now, dying." Her voice remained level, but Jake caught the flicker of pain across her features. "Whatever advantage you possess, we need it." Jake stopped pacing, forced himself to take a deep breath. "Okay, let's think this through logically. The bug, the death crawler, it wasn't immune to physical attacks. It just, what? Phased through Virexian weapons somehow? Yes, as if they existed in slightly different realities. But not human attacks." Jake frowned, his engineer's mind turning the problem over. "There must be a scientific explanation. Some difference in our biology, our technology, something." A soft chime interrupted them, and the door to the war room slid open. Ambassador Chen entered, followed closely by Melissa Wong, the expedition's xenobiologist. Both looked tense. Queen Alara, Chen bowed formally. We've been briefed on the situation. Earth stands ready to assist in any way possible. Jake shot Chen a look of relief. Good. We need all the help we can get. Chen's smile was tight. That's why we're bringing in Dr. Wong. Her expertise in xenobiology might shed light on why you were able to kill the creature. Melissa stepped forward, her usual scholarly calm betrayed by the rapid tap of her fingers against her tablet. I've reviewed the scans we took of the remains. Fascinating structure, unlike anything in our databases. Can you determine why Jake was able to kill it when the Virexians couldn't? Alara asked. I have a theory, Melissa said, glancing between them. The Deathcrawler's cellular structure shows signs of quantum indeterminacy, exists in multiple states simultaneously. Virexian physiology has certain quantum properties as well, from what I've observed. There could be a resonance effect that causes the creature to slip between states when confronted with similar quantum signatures. And humans, Jake prompted, completely different quantum profile. To us, it's fully solid, fully in our reality. Jake felt a surge of hope. So any human could potentially fight these things? In theory, yes. Melissa's expression grew cautious. But there's more. The creature's venom, it's specifically keyed to Virexian biology. The paralytic agent targets neurological pathways that humans simply don't have. Alara's eyes widened slightly. You're saying that Deathcrawlers were engineered to kill Virexians specifically, Melissa confirmed. They might still be dangerous to humans. We haven't fully analyzed all components of the venom, but we wouldn't be affected the same way. Ambassador Chen cleared his throat. This changes the diplomatic calculus significantly. Earth could provide direct military assistance without the same level of risk to our personnel. Absolutely not, Jake cut in, surprising himself with his vehemence. We're not turning this into some kind of proxy war where Earth soldiers fight and die for Virex Prime. That's not what I'm suggesting, Chen said smoothly. Isn't it? Alara stepped between them, her presence somehow calming the tension in the room. What do you propose, Jake? He took a moment to organize his thoughts. A small team, humans and Virexians working together. We need to understand these creatures better, find their weaknesses, and we need to figure out who's controlling them. The Ket are extinct, Alara reminded him. Then someone else is using their weapons, Jake countered. Either way, we need intelligence more than we need an army right now. Chen frowned. The Earth delegation isn't equipped for combat operations. No, Jake agreed. But I bet there are volunteers who have the right skills. Former military, security personnel. And I'm going, you're too valuable to risk, Alara said quietly. Jake met her gaze steadily. I'm valuable because I killed one of these things. That means I need to be out there, seeing them up close, figuring out how to help others do the same. A long silence filled the room as Alara considered his words. Finally, she nodded. Assemble your team, Defender. You have until morning. As Chen and Melissa left to begin preparations, Jake found himself alone again with Alara. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. Am I making a mistake? He asked softly. She moved closer, close enough that he could see the subtle shifts of color beneath her iridescent skin. Are you asking the Queen or Alara? I'm asking you. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched his arm, the first direct contact between them. I believe you are following your nature, Jake Carter, as we all must. The touch lingered, warm and surprisingly human-like, before she withdrew and turned to leave. At the doorway, she paused. Choose your team wisely. The fate of my world may depend on it. After she was gone, Jake stood motionless in the center of the war room, the tactical display casting blue shadows across his face. He had come to this planet to repair communication satellites. Now he was preparing to hunt monsters. Somewhere deep in his chest, beyond the fear and doubt, a spark of determination ignited. He would not let Alara down. He would not let this world fall, even if he had no idea how to save it. Dawn broke over the capital city with an eerie beauty, the crystalline spires catching the first light and fragmenting it into 1,000 colors. Jake stood on the landing platform, watching as his hastily assembled team made final preparations for departure. Ambassador Chen had come through with surprising efficiency, identifying 4 Earth personnel with combat experience among the larger delegation. Santos, a security officer with Marine training. Quan, a communications specialist with Korean military background. Navarro, a pilot who'd flown combat missions in the resource wars, and surprisingly, Bennett, a cultural liaison who'd kept his special forces background suspiciously absent from his official file. From the Virexian side, Captain Thrix commanded a squad of 6 elite guards, their liquid metal armor rippling in the morning light. Silent, efficient, they loaded equipment into the transport vessel, a sleek craft that reminded Jake of a manta ray, all smooth curves and hidden power. "Impressive team," Melissa said, joining him on the platform. She wasn't coming on the mission, but had worked through the night analyzing the Deathcrawler remains, especially given the timeline. Jake nodded, unable to shake the knot of tension between his shoulder blades. "Let's hope it's enough. Take these." She handed him a small case. "I've modified some scanning equipment to detect the quantum signatures of the Deathcrawlers. Should give you early warning if they're nearby." "Thanks." Jake tucked the case into his pack. "Any other last-minute insights?" Melissa hesitated. "Just be careful about making assumptions. These creatures evolved or were engineered in ways fundamentally different from Earth life. Their behaviors, weaknesses, strengths, they might not follow patterns we recognize." "Noted." Jake managed a tight smile. "Keep working on that venom analysis. If we can develop some kind of countermeasure for the Virexians—" "I will." She clasped his arm briefly. "Good luck out there, Jake." As Melissa walked away, Jake felt rather than heard someone approach from behind. He turned to find Alara, dressed not in royal regalia, but in practical expedition gear, her silver-white hair braided tightly back from her face. "Your Majesty," he said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "A queen must see her defender off properly," she replied, though something in her tone suggested this wasn't merely protocol. She extended a small object toward him, a pendant on a chain, the metal unlike any Earth material, with symbols etched into its surface. "What is this?" Jake asked as she placed it in his palm. "A royal sigil. It marks you as acting with my full authority." Her 4 eyes met his too, intense and unblinking. "It also contains a quantum beacon. I will always know where you are." Jake closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its strange warmth. "Is that for my protection or your peace of mind?" "Both," she admitted. "The settlement you're traveling to, Meridian Outpost. It was my home before I ascended to the throne. My people there are family." The personal admission caught Jake off guard. Beneath the formal exterior, Ilara's concern was raw and genuine. He slipped the pendant over his head, tucking it beneath his tactical gear. "We'll do everything we can," he promised. For a moment it seemed she might say more, but Captain Thrix approached, saluting both of them with a fluid gesture. "The vessel is prepared, Defender. We await your command." Jake nodded, suddenly acutely aware of his lack of qualifications for this role. He was about to lead experienced soldiers into an unknown danger, all because he had accidentally stepped on a bug. "We should go," he said, more to himself than to Thrix or Ilara. As he turned toward the vessel, Ilara spoke one last time, her voice pitched low for his ears alone. "Jake, when you reach Meridian, find Vian. Tell him Laris sent you." Before he could ask who Vian was or what Laris meant, she had stepped back, resuming her royal bearing. The moment of intimacy vanished as if it had never existed. The journey to Meridian Outpost took 3 hours by Virexian transport, flying low over a landscape that shifted from the orderly agriculture surrounding the capital to wild, unfamiliar terrain. Forests of spiral-trunked trees gave way to vast plains where herds of 6-legged creatures grazed on iridescent grasses. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks shrouded in clouds that glowed from within. Inside the transport, the team reviewed what little intelligence they had. The Virexian soldiers projected 3-dimensional maps of Meridian, highlighting strategic points and potential danger zones. "Communications ceased 32 hours ago," Captain Thrix explained, his voice a low rumble. "The last transmission reported multiple sightings of crawlers, but no direct contact." "Population?" Santos asked, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "Earth weapons, it had been decided, would be their primary defense." 417, Thrix replied. "Primarily researchers, agricultural specialists. Was a center for botanical studies." Jake noted the slip into past tense, saw the ripple of discomfort move through the Virexian soldiers. Despite their warrior appearance, they were clearly shaken by the situation. "We don't know that everyone's gone," Jake said firmly. Let's not write them off until we see for ourselves. The transport began its descent as Meridian Outpost came into view. A cluster of structures nestled against the base of a mountain, surrounded by experimental agricultural fields in geometric patterns. From above, everything looked peaceful, undisturbed. No signs of combat, Navarro observed from the pilot section. No structural damage visible. That tracks with what we know about death crawlers, Bennett said quietly. They don't destroy infrastructure, they eliminate people. The vessel touched down on a landing pad at the outpost's edge. No one came to greet them. The silence was profound. Jake activated Melissa's scanner, watching as it calibrated to the quantum signatures she'd programmed. No immediate reading, he reported, but their range is limited. We proceed with caution, Thrix instructed his soldiers, who moved into a defensive formation as the transport's hatch opened. The air that rushed in was sweet, almost cloying, the scent of the vast experimental gardens. Jake stepped onto Virexian soil for the second time in his life, but this time with a mission he'd never imagined. Form teams, he ordered, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. Santos with me and 2 of Thrix's people. Bennett, take Quan and 2 more. Navarro stays with the transport and the remaining 2 guards. Keep comms open at all times. As they split into their assigned groups, Jake touched the pendant beneath his gear, feeling its subtle warmth against his skin. Somewhere across the planet, Alara would know they had arrived safely, for now at least. The outpost waited, silent and still under the alien sun. Whatever happened here, whatever was still happening, they were about to discover it, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the simple act of crushing a bug had set in motion events far beyond his understanding. But there was no turning back now. He shouldered his pack, checked his weapon, and gave the signal to advance. Chapter 6. The Encounter. The outpost's silence was oppressive. Every footstep seemed too loud, every breath an intrusion. Jake led his team through the main thoroughfare, past empty hydroponic stations and abandoned research equipment. Nothing appeared damaged. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of panic or hasty evacuation. It was as if everyone had simply stopped what they were doing and walked away. This doesn't make sense, Santos muttered, scanning doorways as they passed. 400 people don't just disappear. One of the Virexian guards, Merrick's, Jake remembered, made a soft clicking sound. Death crawlers paralyzed before killing. If there were enough of them. He left the implication hanging in the air. Jake's hand tightened on his weapon. The scanner in his other hand remained frustratingly quiet. Either there were no death crawlers in the vicinity, or Melissa's calibrations weren't as accurate as they'd hoped. We need to check the administrative center, Jake decided. Might be surveillance footage, comm logs, something to tell us what happened. They changed direction, moving toward the largest structure in the complex, a domed building with Virexian script arcing over its entrance. As they approached, Jake noticed something odd about one of the windows, a faint blue glow pulsing within. Hold up, he signaled to the others. There's something. The scanner in his hand suddenly came to life, emitting a rapid series of beeps. Jake froze, his blood turning to ice as the reading spiked. Contact, he whispered into his comm. Bennett, Navarro, we've got death crawler signatures at the admin building. Multiple readings. Copy, Bennett's voice came back, tense but controlled. Moving to your position. ETA 3 minutes. No, Jake countermanded. Maintain your search pattern. We need to find survivors. Navarro, be ready for emergency extraction. Santos gave him a sharp look. You sure about this? We should consolidate. Jake wasn't sure about anything, but he knew splitting their forces might be the only way to complete both objectives. Find out what happened and locate any survivors. We stick to the plan. Stay alert. As they approached the admin building, the scanner's beeping intensified. Jake signaled for them to take cover behind a row of planters filled with strange, shifting vegetation. Merrick's, what's that blue light? Normal for this facility? The Virexian guard studied the pulsing glow. Number communications array, perhaps, but wrong location. Could be a distress beacon, Santos suggested. Or a trap, the other Virexian guard, Krell, added grimly. Jake weighed their options. We need to get closer, get visual confirmation. Merrick's, Krell, can you circle around to the side entrance? Santos and I will approach from the front, draw attention if there's anything hostile inside. The Virexian guards acknowledged the order and moved off with surprising stealth despite their armor. Jake waited until they were in position before nodding to Santos. Ready? The security officer checked his weapon one final time. Born ready. They crossed the open space to the main entrance in a crouch, weapons ready. The doors stood partially open. Another bad sign. Up close, the blue glow was more intense, pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Jake's scanner was now emitting a continuous tone. Whatever they were tracking, they were right on top of it. 3, Jake counted down in a whisper. 2, 1. They moved through the doorway in perfect sync, sweeping different sections of the entry hall. The interior was dimly lit, the only significant illumination coming from a room at the far end of a corridor, the source of the blue pulsing. And between them and that light, scattered across the floor like macabre decorations, were the bodies. "Oh, God," Santos breathed. Virexians lay where they had fallen, dozens of them. Some reached toward doors, others curled protectively around each other. All were motionless, their iridescent skin dulled in death. Jake forced himself to focus, to push past the horror tightening his throat. "Check for survivors," he ordered, though he already suspected there would be none. They moved carefully between the bodies, checking for any signs of life. Jake couldn't help noticing that there were no visible wounds, no blood, just the slight discoloration around the victims' necks and faces that suggested the paralytic venom had done its work. "Jake," Santos called softly from where he knelt beside a body near the corridor. "You need to see this." Jake joined him, looking down at what had caught his attention. The Virexian, a researcher judging by her clothing, clutched something in her rigid fingers, a small recording device, standard Earth technology. "That's ours," Jake said, carefully extracting it from the dead woman's grasp. "What was she doing with Earth equipment?" Santos shook his head. "Play it. Might be our only clue." Jake activated the device. A holographic projection flickered to life. The face of the dead researcher, her expression urgent, fearful. "They're coming through the quantum gate," her voice said, the translation slightly delayed. "Hundreds of them. The humans were right. The resonance pattern, it's not natural. Someone is controlling the dimensional shift. We tried to shut down the gate, but..." She looked over her shoulder suddenly, eyes widening. "No, please, I've sent the data to..." The recording cut off abruptly. Jake and Santos exchanged grim looks. "Quantum gate," Santos echoed. "What the hell is she talking about?" Before Jake could respond, his comm crackled. "Defender," Merrick's voice came through, strained. "We have visual confirmation. Central chamber. You must see..." "On our way," Jake replied, tucking the recording device into his pack. To Santos, he added, "Stay sharp. Whatever killed these people might still be here." They moved down the corridor toward the pulsing blue light, stepping carefully around more bodies. The silence was broken only by their footsteps and the continuous tone of the scanner. The central chamber doors were wide open. Inside, Merrick and Krell stood transfixed, staring upward at a sight that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Suspended in the center of the room was what could only be described as a tear in reality, a vertical slit of crackling blue energy that stretched from floor to ceiling. Around its edges, reality itself seemed to warp and distort. And through that tear, visible in brief glimpses as the energy fluctuated, was something else. Another place. Shadowy movements. "The quantum gate," Jake whispered. And around the base of the gate, clustering like insects around a light, were dozens of death crawlers, identical to the one Jake had crushed in the royal court, but motionless, as if waiting. "Why aren't they attacking?" Santos breathed, his weapon trained on the nearest cluster. Krell made a low, warning sound. "They are dormant. For now." Jake studied the scene, his engineer's mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. The quantum gate seemed to be both a portal and a control mechanism, the death crawlers responding to its energy in some way. "We need to shut it down," he decided. "Cut off whatever's coming through." "How?" Merrick asked. "This technology is beyond even Virexian science." Jake moved closer to the gate's control panel, careful to avoid the dormant death crawlers. The interface was a mixture of Virexian symbols and what appeared to be another, older language he didn't recognize. "This is Ket," Krell said softly, pointing to the unknown script. "Ancient enemy writing." "Someone repurposed your equipment," Jake realized. "Combined it with Ket technology to create this gate." "Sabotage," Santos concluded. "But who? And why?" Jake was about to respond when something changed in the gate's energy pattern. The blue light intensified, pulsing faster. The dormant death crawlers began to stir, their segmented bodies quivering. "They're waking up," Jake warned, backing away from the control panel. "We need to..." The scanner in his hand suddenly shrieked with new readings. Jake looked down at it in confusion, then felt his blood freeze as he understood what it was detecting. "It's not just the ones we can see," he said, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of the gate. "There are more. All around us. In the walls, the ceiling. They're everywhere." As if his words had summoned them, the air shimmered with sudden movement. Death crawlers materialized from what had seemed like solid surfaces, their bodies phasing in and out of visibility as they oriented toward the intruders. "Run!" Jake commanded, already backing toward the exit. "Now!" They didn't need to be told twice. All four sprinted for the doorway as the first wave of death crawlers surged toward them, moving with impossible speed across the floor and walls. Jake slammed his hand against his comm as they ran. "Bennett, Navarro, emergency extraction. Admin building is compromised. Repeat, admin building is hot." They burst out into the sunlight, but the creatures followed, their bodies shimmering between visibility and something else as they poured from the building. "Weapons free!" Jake shouted, turning to fire at the nearest cluster. His pulse rifle tore through them with satisfying effectiveness. The Earth technology unaffected by whatever quantum properties protected them from Virexian weapons. Santos fell into position beside him, laying down suppressive fire as Merrick's and Krell moved to flank the approaching swarm. The Virexian guards had switched to projectile weapons supplied by the Earth team, less advanced than their normal arms, but deadly against the death crawlers. For a moment it seemed they might hold the creatures back. Then Jake's scanner gave a new warning, different frequency, higher pitch. "Above!" he yelled, looking up just in time to see death crawlers descending from the building's roof like a nightmare rain. One landed on Krell's shoulder. The guard screamed, a sound Jake hadn't known Virexians could make, as the creature's venom took immediate effect. He collapsed, body rigid, as more crawlers swarmed over him. "Fall back!" Jake ordered, firing upward to clear a path. "To the transport! Move!" They ran, pursued by the relentless wave of deadly creatures. Jake's pendant burned hot against his chest, pulsing in time with his racing heart. He thought of Ilara waiting for news, of her connection to this place and its people, of how he was failing her. Behind them, the quantum gate's energy surged visibly, the blue light now intense enough to cast shadows even in daylight. Whatever was happening, it was accelerating, and they were running out of time. The transport vessel came into view, its hatch already opened with Navarro at the controls. Bennett's team provided covering fire from defensive positions around the landing pad, their weapons cutting down death crawlers by the dozens. But for every creature they killed, more seemed to phase into existence. "Get aboard!" Jake shouted as they reached the perimeter. "We need to get airborne!" Santos and Merrick sprinted up the ramp. Jake was about to follow when he caught movement from the corner of his eye. Not a death crawler, but a humanoid figure, ducking between buildings on the outpost's far side. "A survivor," he breathed, hesitating on the ramp. Bennett saw his distraction. "Jake, we have to go." "Now. There's someone still alive out there." Jake pointed toward where he'd seen the movement. "We can't just leave them." "We'll be dead too if we stay," Santos called from inside the transport. "The crawlers are still coming." Jake made a split-second decision. "Get everyone aboard. Be ready to lift off on my signal." Before anyone could stop him, he leapt off the ramp and sprinted toward where he'd seen the figure. "Jake!" Bennett's shout followed him, but he didn't turn back. The pendant at his chest burned hotter, almost painfully so. Jake weaved between structures, following glimpses of movement ahead. Death crawlers scuttled in his peripheral vision, but strangely, none attacked directly. He rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. There, standing calmly in a small courtyard despite the chaos around them, was a Virexian male, older than most Jake had met, with facial markings he didn't recognize. "Vayan," Jake guessed, remembering Ilara's final instruction. The Virexian's four eyes widened slightly. "Who asks?" "Laris sent me," Jake said, the unfamiliar name feeling strange on his tongue. Something shifted in Vayan's expression, recognition followed by a deep sadness. "Laris." He spoke the name like a prayer. "She remembers." "We need to go," Jake urged, glancing back toward the transport. "There's a ship." "It is too late for escape," Vayan interrupted, his voice oddly calm. "The gate is fully active now. They are coming through in force." "Who is, the Ket?" Vayan's laugh was bitter. "The Ket are long dead. Their weapons remain, controlled by new masters." "Then who?" "Those who would punish Virex Prime for its past sins," Vayan said. "Those who never forgot what the Dominion did to their worlds." Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. You're working with them. You helped create the gate. Vian didn't deny it. For 17 cycles I have prepared. The crawler in the court was a test, to see if our enemies could reach even the heart of power. You sent it to kill Alara. Jake's hand moved to his weapon. Not to kill, to warn. Vian's gaze sharpened. The Queen knows what crimes our ancestors committed. The reparations never paid. The world's left broken. So you're helping an alien race exterminate your own people? Jake couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. That's your solution? Not extermination, justice. Vian stepped closer. But then you arrived. A human. Unknown factor. You killed the unkillable and became defender. His expression grew curious. Why did she send you to me? Why speak my name to you? Jake's calm crackled urgently. Jake! Bennett's voice. Swarm intensifying. We can't hold much longer. I have to go, Jake said, backing away from Vian. Come with me. Explain yourself to Alara. There has to be another way. Vian smiled sadly. There is no other way. But you should not die here. You are innocent of our crimes. He reached into his robes and withdrew a small device. Take this to Laris. Tell her I remembered our promise, always. Jake hesitated, then accepted the device. Who is Laris to you? To the Queen? Laris is who Alara was, Vian said softly, before duty claimed her, before she became queen instead of... He trailed off, looking past Jake. They are here. Jake turned to see a new wave of death crawlers approaching, larger than before, moving with unnatural coordination. Behind them came something else, tall, shadowy figures, unlike any species Jake had encountered. Go, Vian commanded. I will hold them as long as I can. Jake wanted to argue, to drag the traitor back to face justice, but survival instinct won out. He sprinted back toward the transport, dodging death crawlers that seemed strangely reluctant to attack him directly. The transport's engines roared as he approached, the craft already beginning to lift. Jake pushed himself harder, lungs burning. Bennett and Quan leaned out from the rising ramp, arms extended. Jump! Bennett shouted. Jake gathered his remaining strength and leapt upward as the transport cleared the ground. Bennett and Quan caught his arms, hauling him aboard as the hatch began to close. Through the narrowing gap, Jake caught one last glimpse of Vian standing in the courtyard, surrounded by advancing shadows, his expression one of grim acceptance. Then the hatch sealed, and the transport rocketed skyward, away from the overrun outpost and the quantum gate that pulsed like a malevolent star below them. Inside, the team's expressions ranged from relief to fury. Santos glared at Jake from where he was treating a wound on Quan's arm. That was suicidal, the security officer snapped. What the hell were you thinking? Jake sank onto a bench, exhaustion washing over him. I found a survivor. Sort of. Sort of, Bennett echoed. He wasn't a victim. He was part of it. Jake pulled out Vian's device, studying its unfamiliar design. He helped create the gate. Let the death crawlers in. Merrick's hissed, the Virexian equivalent of a curse. A traitor. He said it was justice, for something the Virexian Dominion did in the past. Jake looked up at the gathered faces. There's more going on here than just an invasion. This is personal. Navarro called back from the cockpit. Capital's been notified. We're cleared for emergency return. ETA 90 minutes. Jake nodded, then reached for his comm. I need to speak to the Queen, privately. Minutes later, with the transport speeding through Virex Prime's atmosphere, Jake sat in the small communications booth, Vian's device heavy in his hand. Alara's holographic image flickered before him, her expression tightly controlled. Defender, your signal is secured. Report. Jake took a deep breath. Meridian Outpost is lost. Everyone's dead except Vian. Alara's composure slipped for just an instant. Vian lives. He's behind this, at least partly. He created a quantum gate that allowed the death crawlers through. Impossible, she whispered. He would never... He said to tell Laris that he remembered his promise. Jake watched her closely. Who is Laris, Alara? The Queen's image seemed to flicker, though whether from emotion or transmission issues, Jake couldn't tell. A name from the past, one I have not heard in many cycles. Your name, before you were Queen. Her silence was confirmation enough. Vian gave me this. Jake held up the device. Said I should bring it to you. Alara's eyes fixed on the object. Do not activate it. Do not let anyone else touch it. Bring it directly to me when you return. What is it? Hope, she said softly. Or doom. I will not know until I see it. Jake stared at her hologram, seeing the queen but thinking of Laris, the person she had been before duty and crown. What connection did she have to Vian? What promise had been made between them? You knew, he realized suddenly, when you sent me to find him. You knew he was involved. I suspected, she corrected. Vian is, the most brilliant quantum physicist our world has produced. If anyone could create such a gate, it would be him. And your connection to him, her expression hardened, is not relevant to your mission, Defender. But it was. Jake could feel it in his bones. Whatever was happening on Virex Prime, whatever invasion they faced, its roots stretched deep into the planet's past, into Alara's past. We'll be back at the capital soon, he said instead of pressing further. The death crawlers are being controlled by someone, not the Ket. Vian said they're extinct. Yes, Alara agreed. They have been gone for centuries, but their weapons remained, their technology, all waiting for someone with the knowledge to use them. Someone with a grudge against Virex Prime. The Queen's image wavered. Our history is complex. The Dominion was not always benevolent. Before the Awakening, before we renounced conquest, you made enemies, Jake finished for her. Many. Her voice was barely audible. Return safely, Defender. We have much to discuss when you arrive. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and Vian's mysterious device. The pendant at his chest had cooled, but he could still feel its presence, a reminder of his connection to a queen he barely knew, on a world he was now sworn to defend. Against enemies he was only beginning to understand. The capital was in lockdown when they arrived. Defense systems activated, citizens sheltering in designated areas, royal guards stationed throughout the crystalline city. What had been a place of serene beauty now hummed with tension and fear. Jake was escorted directly from the landing platform to the palace, separated from the rest of his team despite their protests. The corridors seemed longer, darker than before, the living crystal walls pulsing with subdued light that matched the grim mood. He was brought not to the throne room or the war room, but to a small chamber deep within the palace that he hadn't seen before. No guards followed him inside, just a simple instruction. Wait. The room contained only a circular table and 2 chairs. No windows, no visible technology. Just smooth crystal walls that seemed to absorb sound, creating a pocket of perfect silence. Jake placed Vian's device on the table and sat, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. His muscles ached from the frantic escape. His mind replayed images of fallen Virexians, of death crawlers phasing through solid matter, of Vian's resigned expression as he stood alone against the shadowy figures. The door opened silently. Alara entered, alone, dressed not in royal regalia, but in simple clothing similar to what she'd worn in the garden. Her silver-white hair hung loose around her shoulders, making her look younger, more vulnerable, more like Laris than the queen. Jake. His name in her voice carried a warmth that surprised him. Your Majesty, he responded automatically. She shook her head slightly. Not here. Not now. She took the seat across from him, her 4 eyes fixed on Vian's device. You survived, against impossible odds. Barely. We lost Krell. And the outpost? I know. Her hand moved toward the device but stopped short of touching it. Tell me everything. What you saw. What Vian said. Leave nothing out. Jake recounted the mission in detail. The empty outpost. The bodies. The quantum gate pulsing with blue energy. The death crawlers emerging from within walls and ceilings. The shadowy figures he glimpsed behind Vian. The researcher's final recording about a resonance pattern. Alara listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each new detail. When he described Vian's words about justice and reparations, she closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. He spoke of Laris, she said when he finished. What exactly did he say? That he remembered your promise. Always. Jake leaned forward. What promise, Alara? What's your connection to the man who's helping destroy your world? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she finally reached for the device, her fingers hovering over its surface as if it might burn her. Do you know what the awakening was, Jake? The event that transformed Virexian society from conquerors to peacekeepers? He shook his head. It was a war, the last war, against the Keti. Her voice had taken on a distant quality. They were not like us or you. They existed partially out of phase with our reality. Quantum beings, our scientists called them. Their weapons, the death crawlers, were extensions of themselves. And you defeated them. We annihilated them, she corrected harshly. Their entire homeworld. Billions of lives ended in a single deployment of quantum destabilizers, a weapon designed by Virex Prime's most brilliant physicist. Vion, Jake guessed. She nodded. He was young then, ambitious, devoted to protecting our world. The weapon worked better than anyone anticipated. It didn't just kill the Ket, it erased them from existence, collapsed their quantum state permanently. The horror of it settled over Jake slowly. Genocide. Yes. The admission seemed to physically pain her. Afterward, when we saw what we had done, when we truly understood, that was the awakening, the collective realization of what we had become. And that's when Virex Prime changed? Jake asked, struggling to reconcile the peaceful society he'd glimpsed with this history of destruction. We renounced conquest, dismantled the Dominion, dedicated ourselves to preservation and coexistence. Her eyes met his directly. Vion was different after, haunted. He disappeared for cycles. When he returned, he had changed, become a recluse, dedicated to research at the remote outposts, including Meridian. My home, she confirmed. Before I was chosen as queen, I was a botanical researcher there. Laris, specializing in medicinal applications of native flora. The pieces began connecting in Jake's mind. You knew each other. We were, she hesitated, searching for the right word. Bonded. What you might call married, though our customs differ. Jake couldn't hide his surprise. You were married to the man who just let death crawlers destroy your former home? Pain flashed across her features. It was long ago, before my ascension to the throne. The queens of Virex Prime do not maintain personal bonds. It is our tradition, our sacrifice. So you left him. I was called to duty, she corrected, and I went, as I must, as all chosen queens must. And the promise? Jake pressed. What did you promise him? Ilara's fingers finally touched the device, activating something within it. A small holographic projection appeared above the table. Not words or images, but a complex pattern of light that shifted and flowed like water. I promised him absolution, she whispered, for what he had done to the Ket, for what we had all done. I promised that one day we would find a way to make it right. Jake stared at the flowing pattern. And this is quantum resonance patterns, Vayan's life work. Her voice had taken on an almost reverent quality. He believed the Ket weren't completely erased, that echoes of their quantum signature remained in the multiverse, that they could be restored. The implications staggered Jake. You're saying he was trying to bring them back? The species Virex Prime destroyed? Yes. Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the shifting pattern. But something went wrong. The signatures he detected, the ones he tried to stabilize through the quantum gate, they weren't Ket. Not entirely. Then what were they? I don't know. Her admission came reluctantly. But I suspect something else found the Ket's quantum remnants. Something that learned to use their weapons, their technology. Something with its own grudge against Virex Prime. Jake thought of the shadowy figures he'd glimpsed beyond the gate. The former subjects of the Dominion? Other conquered species? Possibly. We subjugated 27 worlds before the awakening. Many still harbor resentment, despite our reparations. Vion said the reparations were never paid. Ilara's expression hardened. We have spent 3 centuries trying to make amends, but for some, no reparation will ever be enough. Only vengeance satisfies. She deactivated the device, the flowing pattern disappearing. Vayan believed in restoration, not revenge. If he helped create the gate, it was to bring back what was lost, not to invite destruction. He didn't seem surprised by what came through, Jake pointed out. He called it justice. Perhaps in the end, he came to see it that way. Sorrow weighted her words. Or perhaps he was manipulated, used by whoever found the Ket remnants. Jake struggled to process everything she'd revealed. The history of genocide, the fallen empire, the Queen's secret past with the very man now at the center of the invasion. What do we do now? He asked finally. Ilara rose, suddenly every inch the Queen despite her simple attire. We fight. We defend what remains of Virex Prime, and we close the gate Vayan opened. How? With this. She picked up the device. These resonance patterns are the key to the gate's stability. Vayan knew that. It's why he gave this to you, to me, his final gift, a way to end what he began. Jake stood as well, doubt creeping in. And you're sure that's what he intended? Not a trick. Her 4 eyes met his too, unwavering. I know, Vian. Even after all these cycles. Even as Alara instead of Laris. I know his heart. Enough to bet your world on it. Yes, she said simply. Enough for that. Jake nodded slowly. Then I'm with you. Whatever it takes. Alara's expression softened. Why? Jake Carter. Why risk your life for a world not your own? For a people with a history of such darkness? The question caught him off guard. Why indeed? He'd come to fix satellites, not fight in an alien war sparked by ancient grievances. But the answer came to him with unexpected clarity. Because I stepped on a bug, he said with a small smile, and somehow that made me responsible for what happened next. Ilara's laugh was soft but genuine, a moment of lightness in the gathering storm. A simple action with complex consequences. Perhaps that is the story of all things. She moved toward the door, but paused before opening it. Rest tonight, Defender. Tomorrow we take the fight to Meridian, to the gate, to whatever waits on the other side. And Vian? Jake asked. If he's still alive? Her back was to him, but he saw the slight stiffening of her shoulders. Then I will fulfill my promise to him, one way or another. As the door closed behind her, Jake was left alone with his thoughts and the weight of tomorrow's battle. Engineer, accidental hero, now soldier in an alien conflict with roots centuries deep. All because he'd seen a bug and decided to step on it. Fate, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. Dawn broke differently over the capital, the usual symphony of colors muted, as if the crystalline spires themselves sensed the coming conflict. Jake stood on the command vessel's observation deck, watching the city shrink beneath them as they rose into Virex Prime's atmosphere. This time, they weren't just a small team on a scouting mission. 12 ships accompanied them, carrying elite Virexian troops and the remaining Earth delegation volunteers. A last-stand force for a world under siege. Quite a view, Ambassador Chen said, joining him at the viewport. The diplomat had insisted on coming, despite Jake's objections, claiming this was now as much a diplomatic mission as a military one. Last time I saw it, I was thinking about satellite repair protocols, Jake replied. Seems like another lifetime. Funny how quickly priorities shift. Chen studied Jake's profile. The Queen has remarkable faith in you. Not in me. In this. Jake patted the secured case at his hip that contained Vian's device. Ilara had explained its purpose during the pre-mission briefing, though much of the quantum theory had gone over even his engineer's head. The simplest explanation, it was a key and a disruptor. The key to understanding the gate's resonance patterns and the means to disrupt them. Still, Chen persisted, she's entrusting the future of her world to a satellite engineer who's been here less than a week. Jake turned to face the ambassador directly. She's entrusting it to her former husband's final message. I'm just the delivery boy. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly at the revealed connection between Alara and Vian, information Jake probably shouldn't have shared, but his patience for diplomatic niceties was wearing thin. The Queen's personal history is not part of the official record, Chen noted carefully. And it stays that way, Jake replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. Further conversation was interrupted by Captain Thrix, approaching with purpose in his fluid stride. Defender, we approach Meridian's airspace. Scans detect significant anomalies. Jake followed the Virexian captain to the command center, where a three-dimensional tactical display showed the outpost from above. What had been a peaceful research facility just days ago now pulsed with unnatural energy. The quantum gate's blue glow had expanded, engulfing nearly half the settlement, and surrounding it, movement. Thousands of signals registering on the adapted scanners Melissa had calibrated. Death crawlers? Jake asked, studying the display. And something else. Thrix adjusted the scan parameters. Larger signatures appeared, moving with purpose around the gate. Unknown entities, not Virexian. The shadows I saw, Jake said. Whatever came through from the other side. Alara entered the command center, her bearing regal despite the simple battle gear she wore. All present bowed slightly, all except Jake, who found himself unable to reconcile the Queen with the woman who had revealed so much of herself the night before. She noted his hesitation with the faintest flicker of acknowledgement before addressing the assembled leaders. The plan remains unchanged, she stated. 3 phases. First, the perimeter teams secure landing zones and establish defensive positions. Second, the core team approaches the gate with the resonance disruptor. Third, once the gate is destabilized, all forces withdraw immediately. No one mentioned the obvious 4th phase, dealing with whatever had already come through, one problem at a time. Jake checked his weapons one final time. The standard Earth pulse rifle and, at his insistence, a simple combat knife. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the most reliable, especially against creatures that phase through advanced technology. Landfall in 3 minutes, the pilot announced. Defense systems active. Weapons hot. The first resistance came before they even touched down. Swarms of death crawlers rose from the outpost like living smoke, hurling themselves at the descending vessels. Defense systems cut through them by the hundreds, but they kept coming, sacrificing themselves in waves. They're protecting the gate, Jake realized, following some kind of directive. Land now, Alara commanded, before they organize a more effective defense. The command vessel touched down hard, ramp deploying even as the engines were still cooling. Perimeter teams rushed out, establishing defensive positions as planned. Jake moved to follow, but Alara caught his arm. Wait, she said, her voice pitched for his ears alone. The core team needs 1 more minute to synchronize. Jake used the moment to study her face, searching for signs of doubt or fear. He found neither, only a calm determination that both impressed and unsettled him. You've done this before, he observed, led forces into battle. Before the awakening, all royal heirs were required to serve in the Dominion military. Her lips curved in a humorless smile. I commanded an expansion fleet once, long ago. Before you were a botanical researcher? Before Laris? We all contain multitudes, Jake Carter. Her hand slipped from his arm. Even those of us who step on bugs. The moment of connection shattered as Santos appeared at the ramp. Perimeter established, but it won't hold long. We need to move. Outside, chaos reigned. The sky above Meridian had taken on an unnatural hue, the blue of the quantum gate bleeding into the atmosphere itself. Earth and Virexian forces fought side by side, their weapons tearing through waves of death crawlers that seemed endless. The core team formed around Jake and Alara, Thrix, Santos, Bennett, and 3 elite Virexian guards. They moved in tight formation through the secured corridor the perimeter teams had established, heading directly toward the administrative building and the gate within. Something's wrong, Jake shouted over the sound of weapons fire. There's too many of them. The gate must have expanded since we left. It's accelerating, Alara confirmed. The resonance is becoming self-sustaining. They reached the admin building's entrance. Different now. The doorway warped and expanded as if reality itself was being stretched. Inside, the corridors pulsed with blue light, the walls seeming to breathe. The bodies were gone. Where are the fallen? Thrix asked, voicing what they all noticed. Taken, Alara said grimly, or converted. Jake didn't want to consider what either option meant. He focused instead on their objective, leading the team deeper into the transformed building. The quantum scanner in his hand shrieked constantly now, useless amid so many signatures. The central chamber had changed most dramatically. What had been a contained tear in reality now dominated the entire space. A massive, swirling vortex of energy that reached from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. The air crackled with displacement, making breathing difficult and communication strained. And standing before the gate, as if he had never left, was Vian. Laris, he said, his voice somehow cutting through the gate's roar. You came. Alara stepped forward, separating slightly from the team. I made a promise. Vian's expression was complex. Sorrow, hope, resignation all mingled together. Did Carter bring you my gift? He did. Alara nodded to Jake, who unholstered the device from his hip. Then there is still hope. Vian turned to face the gate fully. But you must hurry. They are coming. All of them. Who, Vian? Alara demanded. Who have you brought through? The echoes, he replied. What remains of those we destroyed. Not just Ket. All of them. Every species the Dominion erased. Their quantum signatures, combined, reformed. Into what? Jake asked, disturbed by the reverence in Vian's voice. Into judgment. Vian's 4 eyes fixed on Jake with surprising intensity. You, human, you who killed the unkillable, you still don't understand your role in this. Enlighten me, Jake said, finger tensing on his weapon's trigger. The death crawlers couldn't be killed by Virexians because they exist out of phase with us. A deliberate design by the Ket to make their weapons unstoppable. Vian stepped closer. But humans exist at a different quantum frequency altogether. One the Ket never encountered, never designed against. So I could kill it by accident, Jake summarized. Lucky me. Not luck, Vian insisted. Design. The final piece. The variable I couldn't control for in my calculations. He turned back to Alara. When the human delegation arrived, I knew it was time. The resonance pattern could finally be completed. Understanding dawned on Alara's face. You used Jake as a catalyst. His quantum signature, different from ours. It created the possibility for the gate to form. Yes, Vian admitted, though I didn't anticipate he would become defender. That was poetic justice I couldn't have planned. Jake felt manipulated, used as a pawn in a game centuries in the making. So you brought these echoes through to do what? Destroy Virex Prime as revenge? Not destruction, Vian corrected. Restoration, balance. The echoes will take what was taken from them, no more, no less. Our lives, Thrix growled. Our world. A proportion, Vian said. A percentage equal to what was lost. Alara stepped forward, close enough now to touch her former husband if she chose. And you appointed yourself judge? Decided alone what price was fair? Someone had to. His voice broke slightly. You promised absolution, Laris. But words and treaties and reparations, they don't balance the scales of genocide. And this does? She gestured to the gate, to the chaos beyond the building where their forces fought desperately. More death? Controlled death, he insisted. Measured exactly. And then, peace. Real peace. Earned, not declared. Jake watched them, these former lovers bound by history and separated by ideology, arguing philosophy while a battle raged. He'd had enough. The device, Alara, he prompted. It's time. She nodded without taking her eyes from Vian. Yes, it is. Jake moved forward, proffering Vian's creation. Alara took it, fingers brushing his briefly. Step back, she instructed everyone. The resonance disruption will be unpredictable. The team withdrew to the chamber's edges while Alara approached the gate, device in hand. Vian made no move to stop her, watching with what seemed like approval. You understand its purpose, he said. I knew you would. I understand you better than you think, Vian. She activated the device, allowing its resonance pattern to project into the swirling energy. I always did. The gate's roar changed pitch, the blue energy fluctuating wildly as the device's pattern interacted with it. For a moment it seemed to be working. The gate's edges contracted slightly, the energy destabilizing. Then everything went wrong. Instead of continuing to contract, the gate suddenly expanded, energy surging outward in a concussive wave that knocked everyone off their feet. Jake crashed into a wall, momentarily stunned. When his vision cleared, he saw Alara still standing somehow, the device clutched in white-knuckled hands as the gate's energy swirled around her. Alara! He shouted, struggling to his feet. Vian reached her first, his expression horrified. No! You're using it wrong! It's not meant to close the gate. It's meant to stabilize it, to make it permanent. Alara's face turned toward him, a terrible understanding dawning. You never intended to close it. It's the only way, Vian pleaded. The echoes must come through, all of them. The balance must be restored. And then what? She demanded, her voice cutting through the gate's howl. After they've taken their percentage? After countless innocent Virexians die for crimes committed centuries before they were born? Then it ends, Vian insisted. The cycle breaks. We start anew. No! Ilara's decision was absolute. Not like this. Never like this. She twisted something on the device, overriding its programming with sheer force of will. The resonance pattern shifted, becoming something new, something unplanned. Stop! Vian lunged for her, but Jake intercepted him, tackling the older Virexian to the ground. Let her finish! Jake shouted, pinning Vian as best he could. You don't understand! Vian struggled against him. That configuration, it won't just close the gate, it will collapse the entire quantum field. Everyone inside the radius. He didn't need to finish. Jake understood instantly. Alara wasn't just closing the gate, she was collapsing it, and herself with it. Alara! He shouted, releasing Vian to run toward her. Don't! She turned to him, her four eyes meeting his two across the chaotic chamber. In that moment he saw not the queen, but Laris, the woman who had loved and lost and carried the weight of her people's sins. Take care of them, Defender, she said, her voice somehow clear despite the maelstrom. Better than we took care of others. The device in her hands pulsed one final time. The gate's energy contracted violently, collapsing inward like a star imploding. Jake felt himself being pulled away, Thrix and Santos dragging him backward as the chamber began to disintegrate around them. No! He fought against them. Ilara! The last thing he saw before they pulled him from the chamber Was Ilara standing at the center of the collapsing gate, Vayan now beside her, his hand finding hers in what looked like reconciliation at the end. Then the world went white, and Jake knew nothing more. Chapter 10. The Defender. The first thing Jake became aware of was pain, a dull, persistent ache that seemed to permeate every cell in his body. The second was voices, distant at first, then gradually sharpening into clarity. Stable now. Quantum radiation decreasing? And the gate? Collapsed completely. No residual signatures detected. Jake forced his eyes open, wincing at the harsh light of the medical facility. Santos stood nearby, his arm in a suspension field as a Virexian healer worked on a nasty-looking wound. Bennett sat at the foot of Jake's bed, relief washing over his face as he noticed Jake's consciousness. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Bennett said. "You had us worried." Jake's throat felt like sandpaper. "How long?" 3 days. Santos approached, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. "You took the brunt of the quantum backlash when the gate collapsed." Memory flooded back. The chaotic chamber, the collapsing gate, Ilara's final words. The Queen? The silence that followed answered his question before Bennett spoke. Gone. Her and Vayan both. The entire central chamber was erased from existence, like it was never there. Jake closed his eyes, grief washing over him. The echoes? The creatures that came through? Without the gate, they lost cohesion, Santos explained. The death crawlers just fell apart, turned to dust. Whatever was controlling them couldn't maintain its hold in our reality once the gate collapsed. So we won, Jake said, the victory feeling hollow. Virex Prime survived, Bennett corrected quietly. At a cost. Jake nodded, understanding the distinction. He tried to sit up, muscles protesting the movement. Easy, Santos cautioned. The doctors said the quantum exposure did something to your cellular structure. You need time to recover. How many did we lose? Jake asked, needing to know the full extent. Bennett and Santos exchanged glances. 37 Virexian soldiers, 3 from Earth, Navarro, Quan, and a security officer named Patel, and hundreds at the outpost before we arrived. And Ilara. The unspoken addition hung in the air between them. What happens now? Jake asked. To Virex Prime? To the Earth delegation? That's complicated, Bennett admitted. The Virexian Council of Elders has assumed temporary leadership. They've requested Earth's continued presence during the transition. Ambassador Chen is in negotiations as we speak. A Virexian healer approached, checking the monitors beside Jake's bed. Your quantum signature is stabilizing, Defender. Another day of rest should suffice. Jake frowned at the continued use of the title. I'm not the Defender anymore. The Queen is gone. The healer tilted her head in what Jake had come to recognize as confusion. The title was bestowed by the Queen herself. It does not expire with her passing. Before Jake could argue further, the medical facility's doors slid open. A delegation of Virexian elders entered, their formal robes and solemn bearing creating an immediate shift in the room's atmosphere. Santos and Bennett straightened, bowing slightly. The lead elder, distinguishable by the intricate patterns on her robes, approached Jake's bed. Defender Carter, it is good to see you recovering. Jake nodded, uncertain how to respond. Thank you, Elder. Taris, she supplied, First Elder of the Council. We have come to express our gratitude for your service to Virex Prime and to discuss your future role. My future role? Jake echoed, bewildered. I'm an engineer from Earth. Once I'm recovered, I'll return to my delegation. Elder Taris exchanged glances with her colleagues. That is one possibility. There is another. From within her robes, she produced a familiar object, the pendant Ilara had given Jake before the mission to Meridian, the royal sigil that marked him as acting with her authority. This was found among your possessions, Taris said. You know what it signifies? The Queen's trust, Jake said simply. More than that. Taris placed the pendant on the bed beside him. In our tradition, when a monarch falls without naming a successor, the royal sigil passes their authority to the bearer. To you, Defender Carter. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. That's impossible. I'm not Virexian. I've been on your world less than 2 weeks. Yet you killed the unkillable, another elder said. You helped close the gate. You carry a quantum signature unlike any Virexian, one that proved crucial in our moment of need. And most importantly, Taris added, Queen Ilara chose you. Jake looked from the pendant to the assembled elders, then to his fellow humans, who appeared as shocked as he felt. You can't seriously want me to... What? Rule Virex Prime? Not rule, Terrace corrected. Guide, temporarily, until a new queen is selected through traditional means. But in this time of transition, when old wounds have been reopened and ancient sins confronted, perhaps what is needed is someone untainted by our history. Jake's mind reeled with the proposition. Him, a satellite engineer, serving as some kind of interim leader for an alien civilization? It was absurd, impossible, and yet, he thought of Alara's final words. Take care of them, Defender. Better than we took care of others. He thought of the quantum gate, of the echoes seeking balance for ancient injustices, of cycles of violence and retribution that spanned centuries. This isn't something I can decide right now, he said finally. I need time, and I need to speak with the Earth delegation. Terrace nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Of course, the Council will await your decision. She gestured, and the elders withdrew as formally as they had entered. Silence descended on the medical facility. Santos was the first to break it with a low whistle. Well, that's not something they cover in deployment briefings, he quipped. Bennett's expression was more serious. Jake, you need to tread carefully here. This has major diplomatic implications. Earth has never had a citizen in such a position on another world. Jake barely heard them. His eyes remained fixed on the pendant, on Alara's final gift and the burden it represented. The weight of a world that had committed terrible acts in its past and sought redemption in its present. A world where stepping on a bug had somehow made him responsible for what came next. I'll need to see the damage reports, he said suddenly, from Meridian and any other affected outposts. And I want to speak with the remaining Earth. Santos and Bennett exchanged surprised looks. You're considering accepting? Bennett asked carefully. Jake picked up the pendant, feeling its familiar warmth against his palm. I'm considering what Alara asked of me, what it really means to be a defender. Outside the medical facility's windows, the capital city glowed in the afternoon light, damaged but enduring. Somewhere in that city, decisions were being made about the future of Virex Prime, about how to move forward after confronting the darkest chapters of its history. Jake didn't know if he was qualified to be part of those decisions, but he did know that running away, returning to Earth and the comfortable simplicity of satellite repairs, would mean abandoning a responsibility he had somehow, improbably, been given. All because he'd stepped forward when no one else would. Because he'd seen a threat and acted without hesitation. Because he'd killed a bug that no one else could touch. They told me not to move, he said softly, almost to himself. Not to speak, not to interfere. His fingers closed around the pendant, decision crystallizing. But sometimes, Jake Carter, defender of the crown, said with newfound certainty, interference is exactly what's needed.